Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the incredible story of a literal history maker, Salahuddin Ayyubi. Now, you might know him better by his Western name, Saladin. He was this fascinating blend of a fierce warrior and a brilliant ruler, but above all, a man of such deep faith and incredible kindness that he actually earned the profound respect of his absolute fiercest enemies. Let's dig into how this one man completely changed the course of history.
So, think about this for a second. What kind of leader can completely crush a mighty army, reclaim a holy city, and yet still be remembered for his mercy centuries later? It's kind of a historical mystery, isn't it? Well, in the history of Islam, honestly, few names shine quite as brightly as his. We're going to explore this legendary character today and figure out exactly how his unique mix of raw courage and deep compassion built a legacy that is still going strong today. Okay, let's quickly map out the major milestones of his life so we have our bearings. We're starting in 1137 CE with his birth in Tikrit, that's in present-day Iraq. Then we're going to jump to a massive, totally decisive year, 1187 CE. That year marks both the epic Battle of Hattin and the liberation of Jerusalem. Finally, the story wraps up with his death in Damascus in 1193 CE. These are the big historical tentpoles for a truly extraordinary life. Let's start right at the beginning.
So Salahuddin Yusuf ibn Ayyub, which is his full name, was actually a scholar way before he was ever a warrior. And this is a really cool plot twist because unlike most famous military commanders in history, he wasn't known for being this big, brawny kid. Instead, he just loved books. He loved learning. After his family moved to Syria, he grew up surrounded by Muslim scholars. He spent his youth diving deep into Islamic studies, completely prioritizing knowledge over combat training. I mean, nobody looking at this quiet, scholarly kid back then could have ever guessed he'd become one of the greatest military commanders the world has ever seen. But that scholarly background is exactly what fueled his rapid rise to power. As a young man, Salahuddin joined military campaigns under his uncle, Shirkuh. And because of his sharp mind, he quickly built this stellar reputation for intelligence, fierce discipline, and absolute unwavering honesty. This led him through a series of hugely successful missions, ultimately making him one of the most powerful leaders in Egypt. But here is the absolute kicker. Immense power usually corrupts, right? Not him. He lived incredibly simply, he totally avoided luxury, and his newfound influence never shook his devotion to his faith.
And that brings us directly to what actually drove the man. His dream was absolutely not personal glory. It was the unity of Muslims. Why was that so crucial right then? Well, at the time, Jerusalem was held by the Crusaders, and the surrounding Muslim lands, they were basically fractured puzzle pieces, vulnerably divided into all these smaller, constantly bickering states. This internal division made them sitting ducks for their enemies. Salahuddin looked at this mess and realized a fundamental truth. Military strength is basically useless without political unity.
So how do you actually fix that? He didn't just charge in swinging a sword. He took a super methodical, patient approach. Step 1, heavily rely on diplomacy and patience. Step 2, slowly bring all those fragmented territories under one single banner. And step 3, officially unite massive chunks of Egypt, Syria, and the surrounding regions. He literally worked tirelessly at this behind the scenes. It's this brilliant strategic playbook that proves his eventual victories were deeply rooted in diplomacy long before he ever marched onto a battlefield. And it worked. The Muslim world was finally getting stronger. Now, all of that careful preparation boils over in 1187 CE at the decisive Battle of Hattin. This is where the tension just skyrockets. The Crusader armies gathered their massive forces to confront Saladin. And look, everyone involved knew this was the defining moment. This single clash was going to determine the entire future of the Holy Land. The stakes literally could not have been any higher.
So, what does Salahuddin do? He pulls off an absolute tactical masterclass. First, he forces the Crusaders to confront him in scorching, extreme heat. Second, and this is just brilliant, he completely cuts off their access to water. So by the time the armies actually clash, the Crusader forces are so thoroughly exhausted and dehydrated, they're struggling just to stand, let alone fight. Step 3 was simply defeating an already broken army. It was a massive victory for Islamic history. The Crusaders were decisively beaten, and just like that, the road to Jerusalem was wide open. Right after that monumental win at Hattin, Saladin marches his victorious army straight toward Jerusalem, and this leads to the peaceful surrender of the city in 1187. This sets up what is arguably the most emotional and wildly unexpected moment of his entire story.
The whole world is basically holding its breath, waiting to see what this victorious commander is going to do to a city that had been the epicenter of decades of brutal, bloody conflict.
To understand the tension here, you have to go back nearly 90 years prior. When the Crusaders originally captured Jerusalem, thousands of Muslims were killed. It was horrific. Because of that bloody history, pretty much everyone expected Saladin to unleash total, violent revenge. But he didn't. He completely flipped the script. He fiercely protected the civilians. He showed unbelievable mercy. He even allowed residents to leave safely. This one act of compassion was so shocking that it earned him profound admiration even from his sworn enemies. It really is one of the greatest, most defining achievements of his life.
You see, Salahuddin wasn't just a guy who won battles. He was a leader of genuinely unmatched character. He consistently treated his prisoners with incredible kindness. He went out of his way to help the poor. And he freely forgave his enemies, even when he had absolute power to punish them. Stories of this generosity spread like wildfire, not just across the Muslim world, but all throughout Europe. I mean, even Christian historians were writing down how honorable and fair he was. For him, true strength never came from a sword. It came straight from his faith, his humility, and his unwavering sense of justice.
Of course, Europe was completely shocked by the fall of Jerusalem, and they quickly launched a massive new military campaign, the Third Crusade. This brought a totally new, highly formidable opponent to the Holy Land, Richard I, who you probably know as Richard the Lionheart. What happened next was a series of legendary encounters between two absolute heavyweights. Even though they were fighting tooth and nail on the battlefield, they built this incredible relationship based on deep mutual respect. Saladin's strict code of honor and chivalry thoroughly impressed his opponents, including Richard himself. It's like something straight out of a movie. But what was the ultimate result of that massive European military push? Well, despite years of brutal conflict, Jerusalem remained firmly under Muslim control. Through his brilliant tactics, unyielding chivalry, and formidable honor, Salahuddin successfully defended the Holy City against one of the largest European military campaigns ever assembled. He didn't just hold his ground with brute force. He held it with an integrity that defined his entire reign.
And that brings us to the final chapter of his life in 1193 CE. He spent his remaining years in Damascus. And honestly, this is so telling. After all the treaties and all the battles, he didn't try to go off and conquer the rest of the world to feed his ego. Instead, he just focused on actively serving his people and carefully strengthening that unified empire he had spent his whole life building. Right up to the very end, his focus was entirely on the well-being of his citizens.
Now, I want you to think about a number, 0. That represents the amount of personal wealth he actually cared to collect. We are talking about a man who ruled a vast, incredibly wealthy empire spanning multiple countries. Yet when he died in Damascus, historical sources tell us he left behind only a tiny fraction of money, essentially nothing. The contrast is just stunning. The man who ruled kingdoms cared far more about serving his faith and lifting up others than he ever did about hoarding gold. And here's another number for you, 800. More than 800 years later, the legacy of Salahuddin Ayyubi is still inspiring millions of people around the globe. He's this powerful global symbol of courage, brilliant leadership, and above all else, mercy. He brought divided nations together, reclaimed a holy city, and showed the entire world that a true, lasting victory isn't just won with strength. It is permanently cemented through justice and compassion. So we're going to wrap up this explainer with a question for you to chew on. Will you be remembered only for the battles you win, or for the values of justice and compassion you uphold? Saladin's story from way back in the 12th century holds a mirror right up to our modern lives, reminding us that the greatest leaders aren't defined by their wins and losses, but by their core values. His life is proof that faith, unity, and good character can overcome literally anything. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible life, and I really hope this leaves you eager to reflect and learn even more. See you next time.